everybody. My name is Conrad Agerman, the CEO here at Agile IT. Welcome to another Agile IT Tech Talk. I'm excited that we have another guest speaker, Jon Wojan, to join us from Microsoft. He's a Microsoft technical architect. I'll let him go ahead and talk about all the great things about himself. But really, it's exciting because two things. One, I think Jon only has one particular slide to get going, and then we're just going to jump in and start seeing things, which is exciting. The topic for today is Azure Information Protection, something that is a service that we help our customers deploy and operate. As Jon really goes through this and starts explaining what it is, the reason for this, or the scenario that I like to bring up with customers, is that you can have your content. A lot of it starts at content. You can talk about email, but files, but from a simplistic perspective, thinking about files, and if you have files in a folder in it, and you can create security and say, I'm only going to have these people have access to it. And that's great. You should always protect it for what you need. The problem is that once somebody has granted access and they can get access to that file, they can take that file and kind of do with it what they will. They may stick it on a USB drive, which you may want to allow them to do. You may want them to go home and work on it. But at some point, they may take it into a system that's not nearly as protected. They may have it and no longer work for the company, so it's an asset that's sitting out there that might be something protected or just something embarrassing that you don't want. And one scenario I love to talk about a lot is you sometimes have people who are good people trying to do the right thing or a good thing, but end up doing it wrong. So the one quick scenario is you have somebody within the business that says, oh, I'm trying to work with these partners and I need to give them access to this information. So I give them the information that they need to do. Problem is they have more information than what they need, and that could be wrong. They could have broken an agreement, broken privacy laws, and they didn't know. They're just a good person trying to make good things happen in the business, but they've implemented something wrong. So the way to help them is by applying policies to protect that information no matter where it goes. So I'm really excited for Jon to jump in here and just tell us what it is and how it works, and then afterwards we'll have time for questions and answers for all of you. If you have any additional questions, just ask it in the QA window there, or you can wait to the end. We'll open up for additional questions. So with that, take it away, Jon.
Hey, thanks so much, Conrad. Appreciate the time. As you mentioned, my name is Jon Wojan, so partner technical architect with Microsoft in the security and compliance group. Going in my third decade with Microsoft, so have seen quite a bit over the last 21 years, and security and compliance has been a focus of mine for about the last 8 years. So really excited to talk to you guys a little bit about information protection. And as you mentioned, adversarially, the data is the motivation layer for adversaries. This is the whole reason that they come after you, and so it's really easy for data to get bled out of organizations, or for adversaries, once they can gain access to an organization, to then take that data and either copy it or replicate it and remove it from the organization. And then once that data leaves your digital estate, unless you're using something like Azure Information Protection, that data is no longer yours. And we've seen a myriad of examples of that over the last several years. The CIA Snowden case serves as sort of a watermark for that. And really what we're seeing over, with most organizations today is that there's a lot of change being driven into, a lot of disruptive events and change being driven into organizations around how people use, consume, and edit and modify data. And with that, 41% of employees just in general say that mobile business apps change the way they work. So if you think about this concept of bringing your own device to work, using your own phone, or using your own iPad or your own laptop to do business work, and then accessing applications from the various stores on those devices, whether it's on iOS or Android, those applications, if they pass along their their corporate credentials to those applications, they can potentially get access to data and files through email or other means, and use that data, that corporate data, on those devices, on those applications that may not be sanctioned by the organization, and that provides an avenue for potential loss or compromise of that data that the organization really needs to have a means to be able to control and protect. 85% of organizations today keep sensitive information in the cloud, and that can be, that could be AWS, that could be on Azure, but it could also be in other places in the cloud, like Dropbox, or on, Carbon Black backups, various different means of storing data and information in the cloud. And so organizations need to be mindful of that and have an idea of how do we protect that data no matter where it sits. 88% of organizations no longer have the confidence to detect and prevent the loss of this sensitive data. And as again, we've seen this happen with organizations like the CIA, where things that are supposed to be marked as top secret get walked off site, and then all of a sudden that data is available to anyone that has a copy of the data. And then 58% have accidentally sent sensitive information to the wrong person, whether that's somebody like a loan officer inadvertently sending an applicant's data, the wrong person, the wrong applicant's data to a different person, or any number of means, people sending over bids or submissions for bids to the wrong folks. This kind of stuff happens on a regular basis. And so how can organizations start to position themselves to where they have control of their data no matter where it lives, no matter where it sits, whether it's on-prem or whether it's in the cloud? And this is where Azure Information Protection really starts to provide you some capabilities, because what Azure Information Protection does is it includes the security in the data file itself. And so once you start to apply information protection, classification, and protection in that file, no matter where that file goes, the security is in that file. And so the organization can track and monitor where that file is going, where it's being used, and then make some decisions around what happens with that data. And if the CIA had been using things like AIP protection on the data that they were securing for top secret, once the Snowden disclosure happened, they could have easily bricked all the data, and then it wouldn't have been useful to anyone. So they could have managed and contained that compromise once that data loss happened. So let's talk a little bit about how Azure Information Protection, the control side of this, works within Azure. So if you go into your Azure portal, you can go into Azure Information Protection under All Services, and you can tag it here to your console. And one of the big things that we have right out of the box, which is really helpful, is we have a high-level list of let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 top-level categories that we provide by default within Azure Information Protection. And what we've seen historically is that organizations that have endeavored to go down this Azure Information Protection path have struggled initially with trying to define what their initial set of labels should be, and trying to get to a point where you try to define every possible label that you may need. And so we provide these top 5 level labels as just a generic set of labels that provide 95% coverage for most organizations and allow you to start to build your labels and confidently adopt information protection capabilities so that you can start to adopt this quickly without getting stuck in the iteration phase of trying to figure out what all your various labels should be for all your various contexts. But the great thing about Azure Information Protection and these labels are that these are very extensible. So you can come in here and you can create your own custom labels for various projects. So you have your general, and you'll notice that these policies, these top policies, are listed as global, which means they apply to everybody within the organization. And then you can build your own policies. So if, for example, you're an organization that frequently does mergers and acquisitions, you can build policy labels that are time constrained during the period of time only when that merger and acquisition process may be in place. You can apply these labels to specific groups so that you can then make sure that the people who are involved with that process are the only ones who can see the materials and the only ones who can share and edit that material. So you're containing the visibility and the data itself to being protected to only those who have a need to know in the context of that project. And then with the protection, you can provide enforcement. So let's take a look here. I've gone ahead and created an entry called Project Aurora, which is just a sample information protection label that we've created for the purposes of an internal project. We could say this is a mergers and acquisition. So you'll notice that you have a bunch of options that you can come in here and set on the policy. So we can set so from a protection perspective, when you're gonna set the actual encryption on the files, you have a variety of different things you can do here. So you can use an Azure-based cloud key, or if you have an organization that wants to bring their own keys into the environment to make sure that they own the root of authority for all of the security that's going to be taking place on files, you have the ability to use hold your own key or bring your own key into Azure and use that as well. You can control some content expiration, so you can basically time this data out. So for example, if if you are submitting requests for proposal or RFPs, or responding to RFPs, or putting out budgetary estimates, or providing something that's going to have a 30-day window, you can come in here and set content expiration based on these, so that after a period of time, that material is no longer viewable based on whether or not that material is expired. You can also allow offline access, and this basically allows you to prevent people from being able to do something with the file and internet connection. And so, a couple of good examples here would be if you have somebody who may have a need for that data while they're on an airplane flight, you can come in here and you can set the amount of time that you can allow this data to be viewed without an internet connection. And so you can strike a balance between the protection of the data as well as the ability of the person to use that document in disconnected states and manage that with the data loss concerns of the organization. Now, additionally, we can set some visual markings on this data for when these policies get applied. And here we can see that you can set headers and footers on the files, as well as you can set a watermark on the file, which is listed here. And you can set the color and the font and so forth on these. And then you can set configure some conditions about when this policy might automatically apply to a set of data. So in this case, I've created a policy called Aurora, and anytime the term Aurora appears in a document more than 2 times, this label will automatically be applied to any file that contains that word. So let me go ahead and exit out of this, and I'll show you on a user side what this looks like and how this gets applied. So one of the first things you'll need on the client side, at least today, until I believe the next version of Office should have this integrated, is you need to make sure you have the AIP Client installed. And this is a separate download that you can push out to endpoints through a means that makes sense for your organization. But once you install the AIP Client, you'll notice that you get this protect option here. And this indicates that the AIP Client is installed and configured as part of Office. And in here, you can see that I've got my list of labels that are in here by default with AIP. And then I also have Project Aurora, and that is because under policies, I've got a policy listed for Project Aurora, and this user, Megan B, is part of that project. So here we have Megan B, and under this label, see if I can find the user assignment. So I won't show you guys that just for the purposes of time. But so Megan is part of this Project Aurora, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to just create a file here. Now, you'll notice that I have the option. This is a new file that I've created, so there's no material in here. And so if I just come in here and start pasting in some sample text, and then in 2 locations within this file, which is our minimum based on the policy, I stick the word Aurora in here. Now the file will automatically be protected because we've got the policy set up in the background. Now, the great thing about these policies is that we encourage users to do the right thing, and so users can come in here and set this. So Megan, in this case, because she knows this document as she's edited is related to Project Aurora, she could come in here and she could automatically set this label. But let's say she's in a hurry and she's forgotten to do this. And so I'm going to go ahead and save this file. And I'll just store it on my OneDrive because that's convenient. And I'll give it a name. And then once I save it, the Azure Information Protection client will automatically detect that this file meets the requirements of the Project Aurora label that we've set. And we can see that this file is now protected. We can see that the ribbon here indicates that this is labeled as Project Aurora. We can see the watermark has been applied to the file, and this file is also being protected as a result of that as well. So what that means is if I try to do something with this file, copy it or move it or do something else, the ability of me to do that is going to be based on what the project is set to. Here we can see the watermark, or I'm sorry, the footers are getting set on the file. So again, we want to encourage people to do the right thing, but we also have the ability to automatically apply labels as well. Now, let's say, for example, this was a false positive. You know, that she may live in Illinois and she's referring to the city of Aurora. She has the ability to come in here and remove these labels and just remove it back to general. And the tool will ask for an explanation as to why this label is being removed from this file. So this gives you a paper trail. So in the event that people are trying to remove protection from files, this gives you an ability to see why these labels are being removed. And you also have the ability to prevent this as well. So in this case, we'll just make an answer for this. And confirm it. And that should remove the label and the protection from it as well. So that's the file piece of this. Now, the next thing I want to talk a little bit about is the integration of Azure Information Protection into some of the other components within Microsoft 365. So with Cloud App Security, Azure Information Protection becomes better together, because with Cloud App Security, we talked about the fact that more and more people are wanting to use the device of their choice with the application of their choice to access organizational data. Well, Cloud App Security gives you an ability to see this usage both at the application level and at the file level by the users. You then have the ability with the implementation of your AIP labels to then start to use that integration within Cloud App Security. So if I come into Cloud App Security and then I choose Investigate and go to Files, here I can see files that are being detected by my digital estate as being used within the organization. So this was a test document that I created earlier that contained information around Project Aurora, and you can see that Cloud App Security, because this information was saved on Microsoft OneDrive for Business, shows that this file was saved. So I can see all of this activity. And then as an administrator, I can come in here and I can see different activity that may be going on, and see, I can set policies and I can set other restrictions based on you know, whether or not data that may contain PII or credit card data or social security numbers or other information in here that may be appropriate or inappropriate to the organization. So here we can see some file access and some file activity. And then we also have the ability to set some policies where one of the things that we can do is, in addition to the auto classification that we did because the user opened the file, one of the things that I can do is I can come in here and I can set some policies to where, like in this case, this one is a file detection policy for which is data loss protection, which means that if anything in this policy matches, so in this case, we're going to be detecting anything that contains credit card information. If anything gets saved to SharePoint Online or to OneDrive for Business, I have the ability down here in the governance section to apply classification labels, which are AIP-based labels. So I could apply a confidential all employees, for example, to this, and then based on the protections in that label, that file would only be viewable by people within the organization based on the labels that it gets set. So I can control that on OneDrive for Business as well as on SharePoint Online. So if I come in here and I set both of these, now the service will automatically monitor for files that meet that data loss protection around PCI data, and anytime that policy matches, the label that we've created in AIP will now automatically get applied to that data without any user interaction on that file. Now, we do have organizations that are still operating in a hybrid capacity, and so they may not have all of their data sitting in Azure yet. They may not have everything in SharePoint Online or on OneDrive for Business. And so we have a capability called the AIP Scanner, which extends the AIP client and then allows you to take that and use it It's really just what it is it becomes a system that you can build in your on-prem environment that allows you to use the AIP client to scan folders over UNC paths via SMB. So for example, if you have on-prem SharePoint servers, or if you have traditional file shares where people may be saving data, you can leverage this Azure Information Protection Scanner and the PowerShell scripts that come along with it to build a capability to scan one time or on a schedule to look for matches to data that match your policy requirements, and apply labels and protection to those documents, even for data that lives on-prem, using the Azure Information Protection capabilities within the cloud to make sure that even that on-prem data is saved. So we've got this this document here, and there's a download up on Microsoft.com, so you can download this and learn about how you configure this. Again, you can just run this on a standalone server and use things like schedule tasks to have this fire on a regular basis to protect your on-prem capability. Now,
John,
yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yep. I was just going to jump in real quick. One of the things you see there on the menu on the left is RMS, right? So,
yeah,
the topic or the capability for Microsoft to do, rights management, information protection. It's been around for years, right? I mean, when I worked there, oh God, when I was working there, like 2004, 2004 at one point, there was all this capability was there, but the challenge was it was just hard to deploy, right? I mean, you had to run separate RMS servers, you had to deploy agents on all of the client workstations, there's just a lot of heavy lifting to make it work.
You had the whole certificate side of it, right? You had to have your old PKI infrastructure, and you had to integrate that and have that thoughtfully prepared. So it was a heavy lift on-prem for sure.
That's right. So I think one is it's important to recognize that this is not a new capability that Microsoft has had. They just, one, made it better, which is nice, but it's just built in, right? So when you're doing things in the cloud, so I think everybody here that at least on the Agile IT customer side, although we'll post this on the web, they're all pretty much in the cloud in one way or another. So now they don't have to be PKI experts, manage that infrastructure, deploy it. Now it's basically thinking about, what does my policy need to be? How do I make sure that people are following it, and then update it? So that's one of the things that we do at Agile IT is we could just set it, but you can't set and forget it, right? Security is a living, breathing thing. So
it's a process, not an end state. Yeah, you got it.
That's right. And it's not a static state, right? You can't just say like, I'm secure all the time. Like, no, you're constantly updating it. And I will say, with a lot of the capabilities that are there, which are awesome, I know you have one more thing to go through. Next week there'll be more. So
absolutely.
And sometimes that more is better. So I think I've said in Tech Talks before, and I'll say it again, and I'll keep saying it. When you define these policies, you need to document it. One, the second is document what the intent of a policy is for, because later on, because of the changes or the new capabilities that Microsoft may have in this or something else, you might be able to implement that intent better or change it. But if you just document what you've done, you may not have documented the intent. So anyway, that's something I want to bring up. But
great point. So you bring up a couple of good points, and two things I want to just say about that. So the RMS piece on-prem, you can still do this work on-prem if you wanted to, but again, all the AIP stuff takes the hard parts about RMS, and moves it to the cloud, and then just makes all that infrastructure part of it easy. And then you get to focus on the stuff that makes sense for your business around what are the classification labels, what are the protection labels, and then the discovery components of that in cloud app security, to make sure that you're aware of the ingress and egress of data to your organization and how you can appropriately apply the controls on it so that you're in control of the data rather than somebody else who may have a copy of it. Now, the second thing you mentioned, which I think is also really relevant here, is that things are going to be different, and so this is an area where there's a lot of innovation going on as well. We talked about Azure Information Protection today, but there's a whole Office 365 data loss protection side of this as well. And so these exist today in sort of two disparate entities. And so for example, if I come over here and you guys all saw the policies that I have listed here underneath my Azure Information Protection. If I go to my Office 365 tenant, you'll notice that none of the labels for the stuff that we've created within Azure Information Protection are going to show up under Office 365 data loss protection, if this comes up. So this is one of the areas that the product group recognizes that this is some pain for folks, and so they're working on, and in fact it's in private preview right now, a version of information protection called Microsoft Information Protection, which is going to merge the best of breed on the Office 365 data loss protection and making sure that you're managing your data going in and out of places like email, and merge that into the capabilities you have in cloud app security and within Azure Information Protection, so that you can get to a unified set of capabilities that when you create those labels and you do all that work on Azure Information Protection, that stuff all shows up on the Office 365 side. So today, if you were to go through and create a bunch of labels in AIP, you won't see those, which I'm getting to showing you here in Office 365. You won't see them, and vice versa. If you create labels and stuff within Office 365, you won't see them in AIP. And so if you're going to start undertaking the effort to do some of this work, make sure you're spending the effort on the Azure Information Protection side, because those are the components that are going to really be central to everything that Microsoft Information Protection will be based on. The Office 365 pieces will gain the consideration of AIP. And so make sure you're focusing and investing your efforts on the AIP side and not on the Office 365 data loss protection side. So you'll notice here, here's my ability to come in here and create a policy on the Office 365 side, and you'll notice that none of my policies here show up from the AIP side. I've got all these policies here, and yet data loss prevention is not aware of them on the Office 365 side. So again, make sure you spend your time and focus your efforts on the AIP side, and just know that Microsoft Information Protection's in private preview, and we should see public preview and release, I would think, sometime before we get to the end of the calendar year. And if you're interested in any information on that, I can give you some links in the window and help you guys get a little more detail on that. But other than that, I will turn it over to questions. I think we're at time.